Happy Wednesday morning. Welcome to reading lesson 6. We are clustering vocabulary to build meaning from a text. So here we go. So we have some vocabulary today. Sort, to arrange according to, kind, class. To separate, to take from other sorts or from others. A category is a grouping, a group or a type. To be uncertain, it means to be unsure. Hesitated, it means to be reluctant or wait to act because of fear or indecision. Followed, to go or come after, to move behind in the same direction, right? You follow somebody. Questioningly, it means curiosity or inquiring. Trepidation, it means trembling or a quivering movement, usually caused by fear. Tentatively, it means unsure, uncertain, not definite or positive. Hesitantly, it means you hesitate, you're undecided, you're doubtful, you're disinclined. Shrugged, to raise and contract the shoulders. A shrug. Expressing indifference, disdain. Unconcertedly, it means, typo, it means involved or interested, disinterested or not caring, unworried, free from solitude or anxiety. Testily, it means irritability, impatient, touchy. You're in a bad mood, you're touchy, you're testy, cranky, ill-tempered, grouchy or cross. Okay, let's talk about your homework last night. You had to read chapters 4 and 5 and record your summary notes for both chapter 4, Henry Street, and chapter 5, Hobie and the Brakeman. So let's share out for a few minutes. So when you share your summary notes for chapters 4 and 5, you'd be reading in your triads, or in this case here with me, together as we read our chapter-based notes. So my lovely little children here would have collaborated for a few minutes about your summaries that you did for your homework. Remember that you're using specific details from the text and from your reading when you're writing your summary. So your summary for your homework should sound something like this. Violet's in New York City with her new friend Myrtle. They go to the Henry Street settlement house to find Chloe, but she's not there. A man named Theo Martin tells them that she has gone to Washington, D.C. to be part of the women's suffrage movement. He starts to ask too many questions, so they get out of there real fast and they leave for the train station. So this is what your historical background information looked like for chapter 4. We learned about a settlement house. This is your glossary and your figurative and complex language. Here's your summary notes for the chapter. We talked about Violet and Myrtle being in New York City, wanting to find Chloe, but instead they find a man named Theo Martin. Mr. Martin starts to ask a lot of questions, so Violet and Myrtle worry that he's going to report them. So they get out of there and get over to the train station real fast. Then I turned my somebody in wanted but so then and turned it into a summary. Copied and pasted it into the section and added a few words here and there to make my sentences sound flow. And here it is. Violet is in New York City with her new friend Myrtle. They go to the Henry Street settlement house to find Chloe, but she isn't there. A man named Theo Martin tells them that she's gone to Washington, D.C. to be part of the women's suffrage movement. Mr. Martin starts to ask too many questions, so Violet and Myrtle worry he will report them to the police, so they leave for the train station. If you're not there yet, if you don't have this many sentences on your notes or on your summary, that's okay. But with each chapter and each attempt that you're working on this, you should be building. You should be adding 1 or 2 more sentences. You should be rounding out your ideas, adding more detail so that your readers understand what's going on in the story because they've never read it. Remember that this is to explain to somebody who's never read the book before, and you want to give them the full, complete picture. Okay, so let's think about the Reader's Guide for Chapter 5, Hobie and the Brakeman. I want you to refer to this that I'm going to post on the board. Okay, so you got something like this for homework. It was your historical background information for Chapter 5. We learned about hobo jungles. We learned about riding the rails, about what Angelinas were, and a steam locomotive. Here's your glossary and your figurative complex language. So your reader's guide, your summary notes and summary for Chapter 5 should have looked like this. The somebody is Violet and Myrtle in the train station in New York City. They want to get on a train to Washington because they're trying to get to Chloe, but they don't have enough money to buy train tickets. So this guy Hobie, this 12-year-old hobo who knows all about riding the rails, tells them how to hop on the train, and he even goes with them. But then a criminal called a brakeman finds them in the freight car and threatens to throw Myrtle out of the speeding train if they don't pay him for the ticket. So now, I took all this information, I put it over into my summary, and I'm just plugging in a few words here and there to make my sentences flow, and I create my summary, the most important parts of the chapter that I want somebody to know. So if I was telling Mr. Karras about this chapter, this is the important information that I would tell him. That Violet and Myrtle are going to the train station in New York City because they want to get to Washington so Violet can find her sister. They don't have enough money for a train ticket, so they end up riding the rails with Hobie the hobo. Then a brakeman threatens to throw Myrtle off the train unless they pay him. Violet gives him money, and he finally leaves. Again, if you're not this far into your summary and your summary notes, if you're still struggling a little bit, if you're not giving quite this much detail, that's okay. Make sure you're adding just a little bit more each time, pushing yourself, really trying to get that complete summary. Okay, so how did Myrtle's word category help you better understand this passage? Whoa, Mrs. Karras, what did you just say? Listen, when you revise your notes, remember you're using your, let me reach for it, your green pencil. I'm using green, it's my favorite color. This is what I use. You can use any color you want as long as it's a different color than what you're writing, because you want to have your writing and then you want to have your revisions in a different color so that you can see what was your understanding before and what was your understanding after. So remember, using colored pencils will be able to see what you do independently and what you do with more support. So let's talk about our learning targets. I can explain the events of chapters 4 and 5 using the hope chest and details from the text. I can explain plot events and characters, details using my understanding of word categories. I can sort vocabulary into categories. I can explain the events of 4 and 5 in the hope chest using details. So let's think about this for a second. You've been doing this every time. Ooh, another typo. I'm going crazy here today. You have been doing this every time you summarize chapters and answer questions about the text. And for this lesson, you'll do it for 4 and 5. So we would have been sorting through words and categories. What does it mean to sort? It's a simple question. It's probably something that you've been doing since all of your academic career, since you've been in pre-K or kindergarten. What does it mean to sort? You sort things every day. Sort means to identify things according to their qualities. So what's a category? A category is a group of things that share similar qualities. So let's think about a category like words at the beach. What words are words that you could fit into a category about the beach? Think about it. You can even use this picture to help you as a clue. The sun, the ocean, shells, beach, swim, all words that would fit into a category about the beach. What about a category of friendship? What words would you use for the category friendship? Trust, share, talk, fun, laugh. These are all things that would fall into the category of friendship. So let's look at the third learning target. I can explain plot events and character details using my understanding of word categories. So understanding groups of similar words can help you grasp unfamiliar words and what is taking place in a certain part of the story. So let's talk about learning about word categories, but in a concentration of Violet. So in the hope chest, I want you to think about word categories for Violet and Myrtle, and this would have been attached to the lesson. I'm going to guide you through part 1, and then you're going to complete part 2 today for your classwork once you have an understanding of word categories. Okay, so your classwork looks like this. It says part 1, word categories for Violet. Read along silently as a passage from chapter 4 is read aloud. Listen for words that relate to Violet being uncertain. Record the words below. So you have this word box. It says words related to Violet being uncertain. Then it gives you a question 2. Discuss this question with your reading triads, which you'd really be doing by yourself, and record the answer below. Why did these words create the feeling that Violet is uncertain? Read the passage from the text and answer the question. What do we learn about Myrtle's character in this passage? Okay, so part 1, you're going to try each step and then we'll discuss it as a group. For step 1, I'm going to reread the opening paragraph of chapter 4 as you follow along with me. As I read, I want you to listen for words. And if you hear a word that says that Violet is uncertain about what she's doing, you're going to write it here in this first box, okay? So I'm going to read the first several paragraphs of chapter 4, up to and including the sentence, "Excuse me," on page 43. And I want you to listen and notice how I read this section in a way that brings out the tone of self-doubt, meaning she's not sure, she's doubting herself, and how it's suggested by Violet's words and her actions. So let me come over to me, and then I'm going to open up our book for us. Hold on. Get to stare into my face for a few minutes. Okay. And a new share over to our book. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs of chapter 4, and you're listening to how Violet's words and actions made her sound full of self-doubt. We're listening for words that are related to her being uncertain. So here we go. I'm starting right here where it says upstairs. Some people were singing. Oh, I'm sorry. Violet, right here at the top of the page. Violet had a lifelong training in good manners, and it did not include going into other people's houses without knocking. She hesitated, but Myrtle pushed the door open and went in. Violet followed her with some trepidation. The house had an ordinary hall with a carpet and an umbrella stand. Upstairs, some people were singing. Violet couldn't understand the words. They were in a foreign language. Violet looked questioningly at Myrtle. Myrtle shrugged. "I've never been inside here before," she said. Violet went over to one of the doors and tentatively pushed it open. It was a parlor, rather like the one back at home had been before it was turned into Stephen's recuperation room. There were some bookshelves, a mahogany table, and a sofa with some armchairs covered in red velvet. A man was sitting in one of the chairs, absorbed in a book. He had a thin, harried look as if he hadn't gotten enough sleep in several years. Violet stepped hesitantly into the room. She could feel Myrtle following behind her. "Excuse me," she began. The man started, although Violet noticed he closed the book on his hand to keep it from losing his place, just as she would have done. So think about those words that I just said. What words did you hear me read that related to Violet sounding uncertain? If you need to stop and pause the video, go back, rewind, and listen to the passage again, go ahead and stop and fill in words related to Violet being uncertain. Okay. So let's share the words you identified that created the feeling of uncertainty. Hesitated, hesitantly, followed, and questioningly. I heard all of these words in that reading section. So take a look at the question in step 2 and record your thinking on your paper. Pause the video and come back when you're finished. Welcome back. Okay. Boop, 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 boop. So these words create a feeling that Violet is uncertain. Why would a person hesitate when you feel uncertain? Why would a person follow somebody else when you're feeling uncertain? Think about it. I'm sure you've experienced it. Why would you hesitate if you feel uncertain? Why would you follow your friend instead of leading if you felt uncertain? Hesitated, hesitantly, followed, and questioningly. These are all words that you can categorize or group together because they all show that Violet has these feelings that she's uncertain about what's going on and what she's doing. So step 3. Here are 2 new terms that are related to this category. The word trepidation and the word tentatively, both of which are in your vocabulary words today. These words are similar to the ones in this category in that they describe how Violet is cautious and she's slightly fearful because she is uncertain. So I want you to complete step 3. Build out the meaning based on what you know of the word category. Take about 5 minutes to complete this. Pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. I'm going to reread the sentences in which the 2 new words appear. We get them in chapter 4. It says, Violet followed her with some trepidation, and Violet went over to one of the doors and tentatively pushed it open. So now it's time to share your answers to the first question. So let's go through this together. So my little buddy here wrote that the first sentence means that Violet followed Myrtle in a fearful and cautious way. The second sentence means that Violet opened the door in a slow, cautious, and slightly fearful manner. For the second question in this step, I want you to share how you would describe Violet's character. So think about Violet's character, and if somebody asked you to describe her, how would you do that? My little girl here described Violet as fearful, cautious, or worried. So here, part 2, word category for Myrtle. Read the words below that describe Myrtle and her actions in chapter 4 of the Hope Chest. Unconcernedly, cranky, testily, shrugged. Discuss the following question and record your answer. What do these words have in common? And what title would you give to this category? You put all these words together, what would you name the category that you're putting them into? Read the following sentence and answer the question. You get 2 quotes. Violet followed her with some trepidation. Violet went over to one of the doors and tentatively pushed it open. What do each of these sentences mean? There's 2 sentences there. 2-part question. What do we learn about Violet's character from these sentences and the words used to describe her actions? So let's share out our thinking. Read the passage related to Myrtle, then share your thinking on the text excerpt after applying the word category strategy. So my lovely little girl here says that Myrtle's character is fearless. She's impatient, she's carefree, and she's adventurous. I think these are 4 really wonderful adjectives to describe Myrtle. Myrtle is definitely adventurous, and I would consider her impatient for sure, and fearless. She had no problem helping Violet right up, dusting her off, and then going off on this wild adventure with her to find Chloe. Let's think about how the use of word categories helps you understand her character. Oh, my lovely little girl here is raising her hand. We made connections to the word that describe Myrtle in the text: unconcernedly, cranky, testily, and shrugged. So here's a text-dependent question. I want you to write this question on the paper where you wrote your learning targets at the beginning of the lesson. So you could attach this to your module notebook. You could attach this to the bottom of your Google Docs paper, wherever you feel comfortable. And think about, how is Myrtle helping Violet to become braver and more adventurous? Just a couple of sentences. I just want to hear your thinking and how you're feeling about the story and where your head is at. So apply your understanding of word categories to the question about the characters and give details from the text to support your answer. So now let's add here to our Violet and our Myrtle anchor chart. So here we have 3 actions and what they say about our characters, and we're adding this 4th one to Violet. We're saying that she gave money to the brakeman to free Myrtle, and that makes her generous and protective of her friends. We're also going to add to our Myrtle's character anchor chart. We find out that she helps Violet find the settlement house, and this shows us that she's independent and knows her way around the city. We also learned that she convinced Violet to hop on a train to Washington, D.C. with this guy, Hobie, that neither one of them had ever met before. This shows us that she's brave and she's determined to help her friends. Are there any actions that Violet took in chapters 4 and 5 that affected other characters? Sure. She gave money to the brakeman. And like we said, it shows that she's generous and protective. We found that Violet finds the settlement house and that she's independent and knows her way around the city. We said that Myrtle helps Violet hop on the train to Washington, D.C., and that shows us that she's brave and determined. For homework, you're going to read chapter 6, and you're going to complete the summary notes and the summary in your reader's guide for It All Comes Down to Tennessee. Reread as you take notes, and let's preview our homework. This is your historical background information. Susan B. Anthony Amendment. This is the 19th Amendment for the women's right to vote. The National Women's Party. It was a group of people that fought for women's rights in the United States. And we're going to be introduced to somebody called Alice Paul. She's a leader in the women's suffrage movement, and she started the Women's National Party. Here is a list of your glossary. You're going to have the antis, the bystanders, what it means to campaign, ratification, unsuited, virtuous, and virtue. You're also going to have your chapter 6 summary notes, somebody in Wanted But So Then, and your summary. And that is the end of chapter 6. Today you're going to work on your classwork, hand it in to me, meet me at Zoom. Tomorrow, meaning Thursday, if you're rewatching, you're going to hand in your homework and meet me on Zoom. I'll see you at 2:30. Bye, guys.